What's going on, everybody? First episode of the Rockets Collective. Apologies for the delay, but we're here. We're excited. We have a really good group, fun group together. Man, we're just gonna go around the room real quick. We got Kelly Eco, Ali Kampajani. We got Will, aka Vice Houston. How are we all feeling today, man? How are we feeling?
How are you feeling, Doug?
I'm just happy to be on the pod, man. Like we tried to get jump started first 20 minutes.
No, thanks.
Everything was tweaking, but I'll get it going for next week. But yeah, let's just get right into it. Let's get right into it. And to start really quick, everyone like, subscribe. Again, first episode, we already got 200 subs, so we appreciate all the support already. We're presented by the Hog Watch, Hog Network, so had to get that other way too. But, first topic, the Rockets, we're going to talk about, them. Should they run it back? Should they make some big offseason moves? We're about to dive into that stuff right now. We'll just start. Whoever wants to jump into it first, let's do it.
I guess I want to start with my boy Kelly. Kelly put out that article last week, got a bunch of really good stuff in there. One thing was, going into the offseason, it seems like a big priority for them is Steven Adams. And then when you look at a lot of their young guys, Steven Adams seems to be the one that on analytics, also with the eye test, that he plays well with all of them, even especially Jalen and Alperen Şengün. With that in mind, since Steven Adams is a big priority for them, what is the rationale behind that? Like, if we're peeling back the curtain a little bit more, it's not just Steven Adams is a good offensive rebounder or was historic in that this past season. What is the calculus for that in regards to both Jalen and Alperen Şengün?
So when you look at how he was used late in the season, and in terms of, obviously you mentioned the offensive rebounding, but just the overall balance he gave the team at both ends of the floor. And Ime, if he finds something that works, he's going to stick with it until the wheels fall off. So when you see, their plus minus with him on the floor, you understand, for Ime already playing a short rotation, he's going to want to lean into that as much as possible. And obviously there's going to be a feeling of regret internally for them losing that first round series and them thinking that, had certain things gone their way, they could have been playing in the Western Conference Finals, or even just how their minds process things. So Steven is a big part of what they do in terms of, just controlling the tempo, giving them extra possessions, knowing that they're a team that struggles in the half court. So if you want to sustain that level of production going to next season, figuring out his future is pretty important. If you know that, Fred wants to be here, if you know that other teams may be sniffing around, like the Lakers, Clippers, other playoff teams might be sniffing around Steven, because now that he's shown he can be healthy, he can produce at a high level, and just even at that age and the price point. That's why you want to see, or why you understand the Rockets, putting him as a priority on their summer to-do list.
For me, and Will and Brad would love to get your perspective on this too.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout the season, we've had conversations about the veterans maximizing, the young guys that are on the squad going into this offseason. A bunch of your veterans are those free agents. I mean, is Steven Adams a priority for you guys and coming back in, and kind of what does that look like for you? Like, should we bring back the same group of guys that were here last year? What are some things that stick out to you?
Will, let's go with you first.
Well, that's a loaded question. Because I feel you kind of asked me two separate questions there. The first of which, of course, is Steven Adams. I think it is a necessity that he's back on this team next season. I don't think that we can go to next. Like, I would be very distraught if we somehow started next season and Steven Adams is not on the roster. I think Kelly illustrated a lot of the reasons why he was beyond phenomenal for us, right? It was kind of a slow start. He's kind of ramped his way back up. But as the season progressed, especially like towards like post All-Star break playoff time, I mean, I don't think it's far-fetched that we could argue that he was a top 5 Rocket, and I could maybe argue he was a bit higher than that, depending on how you want to look at it. Some of the ways that we were able to stay in 2 games, especially in the postseason, was to go double big, was to put Steven Adams out there in those lineups. And I'm not a super big like data guy. Like, I know that's probably more Ali Khan and Brad's lane, but I do know that every time Steven Adams was on the court, the lineup data says we played better with him on the court than with him off it. And I know that's a coincidence. I think that's backed by the eye test, by me watching the games and seeing how impactful he was. Not just on offense, just getting like second chance opportunities on the glass, but defensively as well. I thought he was actually surprisingly pretty well at moving his feet laterally and walling up shots at the rim, different stuff like that. So yeah, I think that outside of hopefully going out there and chasing maybe a star name out there on the market, or maybe making a larger move here or there, I think one of the most important things that the Rockets can do this summer is make sure Steven Adams is still here.
Yeah, starting against that game against the Pacers, the Rockets threw out that double big with Steve-O, and they went on a huge run. And since then, they dominated with that lineup. It was a plus 30 net rating in the regular season. It was better than that, actually. And in the playoffs, I want to say it was a plus 19.2 net rating. So those things aren't flukes. Like, Steven Adams was that good for the Houston Rockets, especially in that double big. The Rockets discovered that late in the year. And you bring that back and you run that for an entire season, this team is going to be that much better just off of that alone. So that is probably the number one priority. You got to bring Steve-O back. He was so important to this team. And they probably lose in 5 to Golden State if they did not discover that double big lineup. So, yes, I 100% think they need to bring him back. Kelly is the guy to ask for this next part. I don't know what the price is. For me, I want to give him whatever he wants, but that's obviously not how it works in the grand scheme of things. We're not maxing him out now. But I'm just curious to see how high his value goes. I look at some teams like the Lakers and other teams. I don't even know how much, cap the Lakers have. But if I'm the Lakers, I need a big. I'm paying Steve-O. I don't know how much they give him again, but the Rockets need to bring him back is what I'm saying.
I wonder, to the market that he has, I wonder how much, like, for example, a team like Memphis, now you see Zach Edey, going to be out for a few months until the start of the next season. Stevens played there before. He has good, friendships over there, relationships over there. I wonder what their aggression level is in terms of trying to bring him back. Having seen that he has recovered from that knee injury that kept him out for, a long time. I think for Houston, and this goes back to what we saw in the playoffs, going to their offseason to do this in terms of internal improvements. Obviously, the half-court offense has to be a lot better. I saw that stat. I think it was a graph on Twitter that from Sport Radar, they compared the passes, distance covered, all that, and Houston was in the bottom quartile. So just for them to be where they were and to still win 52 games, to still be a top 5 defense, to still, losing 7 in the first round, it kind of shows you why Steven Adams was so important, just giving them extra cracks at the apple, even though, they were a team that's still going through their lumps offensively. You need guys that can just barrel in the paint and clear the lane and keep the ball back to LP, kick it out to Fred or someone and have them reset, just to give them another chance at creating a better shot. So it makes sense why you want to tie him down.
I want to throw some in there too to kind of talk about what Brad was saying. I'm not going to pretend that I'm also like the best person when it comes to understanding the cap and how all that stuff works. But I want, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say that we do have Steven Adams bird rights, and we are able to offer him the full MLE, which I believe is around 14 to 15 mil. And I also believe that would be the most any other contending team could offer him. Of course, like a team like Brooklyn, for example, that has a bunch of cap space, could overpay for him if they really wanted to. But, does Brooklyn want to overpay for Steven Adams? And does Steven Adams, is he at the point now where he's more concerned about potentially trying to win? Is he cool moving I don't know if he has a family, but is he cool moving across, to a team like that's not necessarily trying to win, but they'll just pay him a lot of money, and maybe money talks and he does. But if his idea is, I still want to be able to get paid and compete, I think Houston is probably the only place that can give him a sizable deal and also allow him to compete. Because like we know, like Brad said, the Lakers are probably a team out there that would love to have Steven Adams. But like, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think they can offer him more than we can. And so I think that's going to be one of the biggest things that allows us to keep Steven Adams on this team. Everything we hear, there is kind of mutual interest there. So I think it's going to happen.
I'll say this to actually go ahead, then I'll segue.
No, it's like, when it comes to Steven Adams, I think it also will come down to the amount of years that we offer him as well. Going into that, like, is it just going to be a 1+1? Is it going to be a 2+1? That'll really give me an idea of where Rafael Stone and his front office is kind of looking at and kind of aside from Steven Adams, Fred VanVleet, they've extended his deadline for what they want to do with him. I think the next few weeks are really big for us to understand what is the Rockets' perspective over the next 2 off seasons. You're going into an off season now where you can sign Fred, you can decline his option and then sign him to maybe a descending contract, which allows you to have the option to continue to give your younger players some of those longer term, closer to max deals, as they did with Jalen and with Alperen Şengün last offseason. So with Steven Adams, even if they do bring him back, what does that structure look like? Is it going to be where it's a multiple number of years, but maybe the last few years are non-guaranteed, so it becomes a tradable asset, similar to what they did with their other free agent additions a few years ago? So the way they structure and tinker with how they go about offering him that deal will be interesting. And I just want to say, as we're talking about all these veterans, one thing that's really stood out to me about the importance of bringing them back is, Ime Udoka, we talk about all the time. This has been a common talking point. Brad and Will, you guys with the fans, Kelly in his articles, but these veterans provide structure. Ime Udoka provides structure, but the way that the veterans provide structure is not just by being vocal and leading the huddle. It's about what they do on the court. It's about the fact that the Rockets were a top 5 defensive team because they maintained their shell defense. Why? They had guys who taught them how they need to play their gaps, how they became a team that would really help on the nail and kind of help from the corner. And having veterans there who can make sure that the players and all the players are following their assignments and doing that successfully, that's important. Now, where are the Rockets in that? Can they trust their young players to now have gone to that point where they can do that and are professionals? And I mean, they are professionals, but they get to a point where they don't need veterans. Do you still want to have the veterans there who can still play and make that impact by being leaders on the court? So are you ready for Jabari to take more of that role vocally on and off the court? Are you ready for, if you don't want to keep Dylan, if you don't want to, I'm just saying as an example, if you want those younger guys, Tari, to become more of that solidified 6th man or starter, are you ready for him to be that vocal person and kind of help maintain gap integrity, maintain all the things you need to do from a defensive perspective, rebounding, all those things? That to me is the most important thing, no matter how much money and years we give Steven or Fred. Where are the Rockets thinking in that in terms of their roster? To me, that will give me a good idea of what they think about their young guys moving forward.
Yeah, I'll say this as we segue. I had a comment saying, Zeb, you said, Brad, you're good. I'm definitely good. Again, technical difficulties here on the phone, but we'll get it working for next one. I wanted to segue, a really good segue that can, free up money for Steven Adams, of course, is Fred VanVleet's contract. We're all probably going to assume they're not taking this team option of $43 million. That's not going to happen. They're probably going to extend Fred VanVleet 2-3 years, maybe 4, I don't know, but that whatever they give him, that's going to give them a lot more flexibility. Kelly, can you speak to that? How much money do you think Fred's going to be getting when they end up extending him?
So this is what I'll say. The biggest reason why they wanted to push that date back was to give them more flexibility in their planning, right? Like everything in the NBA is a domino effect, right? So Fred obviously wants to be in Houston. He stated that. The Rockets have stated that. So that part is out the window. The question now becomes, if there's something that comes along where you acquire a star, if you're obviously trying to move the 10th pick, and by all accounts they are, if something happens where, you need to move some other players in or with the 10th pick, or you move out of the draft, then you can come back and see, the price point to give Fred, right? Obviously, if you're giving him, well, let's say you gave him 3, a 2, and a 1. You gave him at 25, 27 million a year, right? That's just me spitballing. That would, obviously ease your cap sheet, because this is going to be a team that could be, over the first apron, depending on the next couple of extensions coming up, you want to be as flexible as possible. So I think they're playing the waiting game, trying to see how the rest of the league shakes out between now and June 29th or after the draft. And then you get a better sense of what the price point is for Fred. But by all accounts, he's going to be there. You saw what their product is when he's off the floor. They need, going back to what Ali Khan said about those guys being ready in terms of their organization and their execution. they're still at a point where they need Fred as much as possible, just because of the experience, how he's able to construct the half court, just get guys confident, get guys in their right role. So I think it's going to be, like I said, a domino effect between now and the draft.
Okay, I'll say this really quickly. Kelly, we're getting a few comments about the
Mike,
yeah,
coming in now.
Going in and out a little bit.
Okay, I'm gonna try and fix that.
I'm struggling over here too, so you all good. But I want to kick it to everybody. Like when it comes to Fred, and I agree with Kelly in the sense that there are times where the Rockets look lost without Fred. I know he went down in I want to say it was late January, early February, where they went on that losing skid. And ideally, by this point, you want them to be able to operate without Fred. Especially you want to get Reed into the mix this year and him eventually take over for Fred. But I do agree they do need to bring him back. And I would like to see him be phased out to a bench role eventually. Next year is not that year. It would probably be the year after. But Will and Ali Khan, I'm curious to see what would y'all, do with Fred? How much money would y'all give him? And do y'all want to see him eventually like phase out? And, you want Reed to kind of take that role or a man kind of start at point eventually?
Well, go ahead. You go first.
Okay. I was going to try to be polite and give you the first one, but I'll go first. So I think I have I don't know if it's gonna be a unique perspective, but the way I see it, I am perfectly fine with Fred VanVleet coming back. I think that, and I mean, we can probably get into it a bit more as the stream goes on, maybe another time. Kind of some of my thoughts on the overall roster and the construction with that, and what that should look like going into next season. I do think that a huge reason why Fred VanVleet's numbers this season were not where you'd want them to be, especially compared to like last year, where last year he was it like 17, 18 points per game, 9 assists, somewhere in that ballpark. And I think this year was down to like 13, 14-ish, 6, 7 assists, where it was like he saw, decreases all across the board. I think a huge reason for that is Fred VanVleet is playing almost out of role, if that makes sense. I think that he is being asked to do a lot more from an offensive perspective than what I think he thought he was going to be doing when he came here. I think the team kind of assumed that a lot more of that heavy lifting would be on some of the young guys, mainly like a Jalen Green. And, as the season kind of goes on, it's like, okay, that's not necessarily happening as much as you want to see it happen. And part of the reason I feel that way is you'll notice that in those months where, like I said, Jalen Green, for example, he'll have those months where he's hitting threes at a really high clip and his handle's tight. He's getting downhill. He's looking like the version of Jalen Green that we thought we were getting when we drafted him. Those are also the same months where Fred VanVleet's numbers look really good and his role looks really good. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think those two things are directly correlated. So I say all that to say, I think that despite his numbers not looking the best, I still think that he's a good player. I still think he's very important for what this team has been doing and will continue to try to do. And I think that he's the kind of guy who, as he ages, you can kind of phase him into a bench role. And then that's the kind of, like, if Fred VanVleet's like your sixth man, I think that you have a pretty good basketball team if he's the guy coming off your bench. Now, that in mind, that means he has to be getting paid like a bench player, right? You can't be paying him what he's getting paid now if he's going to be coming off your bench. I saw Sam Vecini. He had a podcast episode. I don't know if you guys have watched it, where he talked about what an extension for Fred VanVleet would look like. And he said like 3 years, $100 million. And when I listened to that, I was like, I don't know if I'm cool giving him 100. I don't know how y'all feel about this, but if that's on the table, I think I would accept the team option and just, I'm going to pay you $45 million for 1 more year. And then hopefully by then we can decide on what a long-term contract for you looks like. I don't know if I want to give him 3 years, $100 million. So that's where I'm at with. But I do think that it's perfectly logical to want him to be on this team, whether it's starting, coming off the bench role, still being a vet mentor, still being a ball handler for this team. I think that's a good idea. It just has to be at a price tag that makes that justifiable. And I don't know if it's 3 years, $100 million.
Kelly, and I know you want to jump in. You go first and I'll go after you.
So the first thing I'm going to say, in next summer when the cap jumps up crazy, that 3 year, for example, 390 or if he's getting $25 million a year, that's going to be it's going to be extremely team friendly at some point in terms of the cap, everything, the TV deal kicking in, and everybody's spending power going up by a considerable amount. And I think to your point about phasing him out to the bench. The reason why I don't think that they're ready for that is just because of, you could argue that over these last 2 years, I hope the mic's good right now. Over the
You
last
sound
2
better now.
years, his control on the team and his presence is probably the biggest reason after Ime, obviously, but one of the top 3 reasons why they've been able to see this level of success over the last 2 seasons. So, if there was a world where Reed was ready and he was, showing that he was the clear guy, then maybe you can have that discussion. But I think until that point, because of his two-way importance, like if he wasn't a top-level defender, then yeah, and he was just coming off the bench shooting 8 threes a game, cool. But Fred has become an integral part. He's probably their most aggressive guard playmaker outside of Amen. Obviously, Amen's 6'7", is a freak of nature. But in terms of what they want to do, going back to what Ali Khan said, helping at the nail, being able to stun, recover, just being able to be that consistent irritant for 48 minutes, I think that's kind of the reason why they love Fred so much. And that's why I don't think that he's ready to be phased out or, get taken on a lesser role, because they need him that much until they get a star at least.
Can I respond to that, Ali Khan? Then I'll let you go.
Yeah, you go.
Yeah. So just to respond, I don't think that Fred should come off the bench to start next season. I still think that game 1 of 82 next year, he should be the starting point guard. I was just saying that when guys do grow into that role of like I said, whether it's a men, whether it's Reed, when they start taking on that, like, okay, they're ready for that job. Yeah. I think Fred will be willing to kind of take some of a back seat, phase into a bench role as he ages. And I just need him to be making money that justifies coming off the bench. Because I don't know if I think was that a little north of like 33 million a year. Probably.
I mean, that's kind of,
because especially as he ages, that might look really bad. But that's what I said. I think I would, at the point where where we are, I think I would be perfectly fine biting the bullet one more year, giving him the team option, and then hopefully going into the expiring where he's like, all right, we can negotiate a longer term extension that's not that much money. Because I honestly, like, if that's, I'm not gonna say I'd rather let him walk, but I think that contract kind of ages badly. But maybe I'm wrong.
So Kelly, Brad, one more thing. I think so. It's a good thing you brought it, because if you bite the bullet on a team option, does that mean that are you for continuity? Is that kind of where your head is at in terms of the team structure? So
that was the conversation I said I guess we would eventually get to. I am, and I'll keep it brief so I can let Ali Khan go and we can circle back to it. I am team continuity to an extent. I think that there needs to be changes. I think we need to bring in, especially if we're going to roll with our same backcourt, which I think is, we're maybe at the point where you might want to look at getting a new backcourt. If you want to go into your next year with the same backcourt, I think you need to bring in insurance for that backcourt, if nothing else. So I am team continuity, but I want there to be some level of a change that address at least one of the holes of this roster, at least one of them.
I would say something after Ali Khan. Did you want to chime in on something?
Ali Khan jump in. He ain't got to jump in.
I'm after Ali Khan. Go ahead, bro.
No. I think the biggest thing with me in this whole Fred conversation is that, as Kelly mentioned, he's the guy on the floor who's an extension of Ime Udoka. But if we're looking at 3 players who the Rockets team as of right now untouchable, I would say, unless there is a Giannis or somebody else. But let's look at Amen. If Amen is struggling handling the basketball, who does the ball go to? It goes to Fred. If Jalen is struggling scoring the basketball, who does the ball go to? It goes to Fred. If Şengün is struggling to be aggressive, who has the ball to set him up? It's Fred. Every single action, whether it's their 21 series, whether it's their horns, whether it's setting up Alperen Şengün for an isolation in the middle of the floor, everything comes and starts from Fred VanVleet. He's the reason you are a low turnover team when he has the basketball. He's the reason when you look at the data and the on and off numbers and the net rating, him paired up with other players is usually amongst their best. And actually, when he's playing and some of these guards are not playing, that's when his net rating skyrockets as well. It's very interesting. So I think with all that being said, he is your stabilizer. He is someone that you have to keep around because your identity, whatever the Rockets' identity is as they're trying to build offensively, keyword I said is offensively, defensively they have one, but whatever identity they want to build offensively, having a guard who can adapt and set other people up like Fred is super important. So for me, I get the caveat of, hey, let's just ride on for one more year. But having him around for maybe another 2+1 to me is super important, because then you can ease a man into taking the keys of the offense. You can then fully determine, is Jalen your guy? Because you still have Jalen for 2 more years with the player option 1+1 technically. And that's it. That's don't come at me in the comments saying, because that's the contract situation. And then you have somebody who is really well in setting up Alperen Şengün. So for me, that for those reasons, as a stabilizer and someone who helps reset Alperen Şengün and his gravity as a scorer, helps get Jalen going, but also knows if Jalen doesn't have it, I got to take over. And if a man is turning the ball over and being too rushed, Fred likes to slow it down. So for all those reasons, he is your stabilizer. You keep him. I would do another 2+1 year, 2+1 contract, whatever that looks like. 33K is better than 45, and that extra money you get left out, that's probably what you're going to give Steven Adams. That's the thing what Sam Vecini was trying to say, and I agree with that. And then you kind of go from there and you build up with Jabari and Tari and other young players moving forward and work through the draft or with trades.
Yeah, and those are more conversations we need to have. It looks like we have around like 35 more minutes left. Jabari and Tari are both due for those extensions as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Rockets do there. You know, they could just wait until they're restricted free agents next offseason and sign whatever cap sheet is available then. But, you know, for now, yeah, I'll say this last thing on Fred VanVleet. The 2+1 deal, I would personally, again, I would probably do that over than accepting the team option. If you accept that team option, Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, does that affect Houston's ability to then re-sign Steven Adams?
No, because they still have his bird rights. They
Yeah,
still
we
have
got
his
bird
bird
rights on
rights.
Steve-O.
So they can.
Right. Okay. Yeah, in that case, I understand what you're saying. In that case, Will. So we'll see what happens with Fred. I hope they do bring him back. They do need him. Everything Ali Khan mentioned, you know, net rating skyrockets, but when Fred's out there, turnovers are much lower. But the team is at its best, in my opinion, when Fred doesn't have to, you know, save the team and do everything.
Yeah, he had to do too much. He had to do way too much.
Yeah,
to
and
Will's point, it was way too much.
a big part of that is Jalen Green. I said we rip off the Band-Aid and let's talk about Jalen Green. This team is really good when Jalen Green is hooping. We all know that. We saw it last March. We saw it this January. We saw it, you know, when Jalen has those, you know, those times where he's going, this team looks different. We saw it in game 2 against Golden State and did not see it in games 1 and 3 through 7. So, yeah, that's been the hot topic this offseason. Everyone's been talking about Jalen, what they should do with him. Should they wait it out? Should they just get him out of here? You know, I've talked about this with Will on our podcast. I know how he stands. I'm curious to see what you have to say, Ali Khan or Kelly. But, yeah, I know they discussed, you know, Booker for Jalen. The Rockets weren't interested in a Booker swap. They like Jalen's trajectory, his young age. But I'm curious to hear y'all's thoughts, man. What y'all think? We can start with Kelly.
You saw me. So I the way I see it for young players, especially players that have gone through like bad situations, you want to see year over year, are they improving in certain areas, right? So under Ime, his first season under Ime, he became a much better team defender, much more engaged, much more physical on that end, smarter. This season, he became a much better catch and shoot option, right? So when you look at his year 5, the biggest question for him is, can he put everything together at the same time, right? We've seen him have these hot stretches where he looks fantastic and everything's flowing and they're playing with pace, and it's a good sight to see. We've also seen other times where he struggled, and with the decision making or shot selection or overall attention to detail. Now, people are split, you know, on the whole playoffs against the Warriors because of, you know, the struggles and the single point games and all of that. The way I see it, number one, if a championship level team or a former championship level team is devising an entire game plan to stop you, there's only so much you can do. Now, granted, were there times where he could have been better? For sure. I think for these guys going through their first playoff series, it was never going to be perfect. Like, I know people had a lot of high hopes for them because of how great their defense was and their low turnover rate and their offensive rebounding rate. But the fact remained that the playoffs is a half court game. You guys are watching the finals now, and you're seeing that this is a half court setting. If you struggle from October till April in the half court, you're not going to suddenly flip a switch. And this is for the whole team. So I do think that while he needs to improve on a lot of things going into the summer, number one, getting stronger to be able to kind of power through some of those, because Buddy Hield should not be picking you up full court and forcing turnover. That shouldn't be happening. But just being able to be a stronger playmaker, a more decisive playmaker and score, and just be more aggressive. I thought too many times he let the pressure like dictate what he wanted to do instead of the other way around, right? So that all comes with experience. That all comes with studying the game film. That comes with learning. And you got to go through some of these 8-point, 7-point games to really understand, you know, what you have to do going forward. So I do understand why they're still high on him in terms of the trajectory. He's still 23 years old. He's shown that he can be dependent on at times. It's more about what do you continue to do around him. Like, this is a coaching staff that needs to update their software in terms of X's and O's offensively. At times it was a little bit too archaic, and I think they can all benefit from improvement. Now, I don't think that's just Jalen, but because he's the most polarizing guy on the team, naturally this is going to be a talking point. But you know, he's young, and I think he'll improve. It's just a matter of how quickly does that happen.
Let's go to Ali Khan. Do you want to go?
Look, man. Look, we've been saying this Jalen Green thing for years now. And you can go back and look at my conversations with in all the other podcasts and other articles and stuff like that. I was high on Jalen. Do I still think Jalen's an NBA player? Yes. Do I still think Jalen can be a good player? Yes. But there comes a point where the conversation needs to happen about resource allocation. You have given a lot of playing time and opportunity to Jalen Green. Like Kelly, you mentioned the first season, Ime benched him. If he did not play well, he benched him, which is why he got better as a defender, got good at coming around screens, being a screen navigator, screen defender, very good. Great, fantastic. This past season, he got better in terms of understanding how to be able to attack specific driving angles. He uses burst well. That was there, right? Like he has that ability. But the question I always come back to is, great, he's somebody who can make tough shots. He's somebody who has elite drive to the rim and has burst. But when you mention kind of coming it all together, his finishing, you know, when you take a mid-range shot, got to be efficient. When you take a catch and shoot threes or pull up threes, got to be efficient. When you go towards the rim and try to make your layups, got to be efficient. Number one, that's first. Second is decision making. You mentioned the Warriors were collapsing on him and they tilted their whole defense towards him. Absolutely. You talk to NBA guys. If you don't like Jalen Green, I'm sorry to say, but NBA scouts and other people will tell you their entire defense was meant to stop Jalen Green. That's a fact. No matter what you think about Jalen or not, that was there. That being said, you have to be able to make reads. You have to be able to recognize how the defender is playing you. If the low man is stunting towards you and then helping back to the corner, you know, or the low man starts to recognize you're not going to pass into the corner, they're going to stay in the paint. You have to diversify your decision-making and your offense and do that. It's been 4 years. He's had plenty of on-ball reps. He's had plenty of off-ball reps. If Şengün is the hub and he's trying to get Jalen going, you know, and if Jalen is not playing well, that's a bad thing, because then your half of your offense is not there. Alperen is getting going, but Jalen is not. If a man is getting going and he's opening up the floor for you, that's when Jalen needs to beat his player one-on-one in isolation and score it. Like you said, he struggled against Buddy Hield not one or two times, multiple games in that series. If Jabari is a floor spacer, you need a guy who can drive and kick the pass out to the opposite corner. I don't want to just highlight one or two passes over the course of a few weeks where Jalen is making a cross-court pass. I want to see him make that cross-court pass every game. And like I said, I've gotten to a point where, like I said, I'm high on Jalen, but at the same time, you have to look at the resource allocation here. he's gotten a lot more opportunity than you look at other players on the roster who are much younger have gotten. And to a certain point, if you don't think the Rockets are a true contender, and this is where the conversation needs to happen, do you still go into next year where Jalen as your alpha, or your one of your alphas, it's 1A, 1B with Alperin? Or do you start like we've seen, maybe having Reed come in a little more and you have Cam come in a little more? I think that to me is the biggest question. I don't know how to answer it. That's an Ime and his coaching staff answer. They got to definitely fix up the X's and O's and kind of maybe use more predetermined actions or things in the half court where Jalen is coming off of some cuts to get him going. But ultimately, he's gotten the chances. Where is the resource allocation going from now on? Sorry, that I know that was the whole thing. It's been on my mind for months. I know I haven't talked to you guys about it yet, but with Jalen, he's so polarizing. But at the same time, you want to give the kid a chance. But if you're going to give him a chance, you have to see sustainability. You can't just see 6 to 7 games of playing well. You have to be able to see that consistently, not just with the stats, but with the reads, with the recognition. If a defense is tilting straight towards you in a 7-game series, show me that you can come up with a counter or a solution to that. That's all I'm trying to say.
That's real. Well, I'll let you go, and then I'll actually share my takes on stop QBing for a second. But I'll let you go.
Okay. I'm gonna try not to yap for too long, because I think this is probably the one that you could talk about for like a whole episode if we really wanted to.
Right.
I think Ali Khan is like very spot on, especially with the resource allocation standpoint. Because one of the things I want to talk about, and this is something I've said on our podcast a lot, Brad. I'm not sure if I said on the TL before, but I think, one of the things that people say a lot is development is not linear, right? And what that means is it's not a straight line, right? It's a bunch of peaks and valleys. It can, it might even regress on occasion, right? But it's not a linear line. That is true. Just as true as development is not linear, development is also not guaranteed. I think people think that if you look at like development is like a linear graph, right, with the x-axis being time and y-axis being development, people think if you put more x time, you'll get more y development. That's not true. There are plenty of examples throughout NBA history of guys who come in and they get the resources Ali Khan has pointed out and don't reach that ceiling. Like I think, for example, a guy like Andrew Wiggins is a really good example of this. I was just old enough. I was kind of date myself a little bit, but I was just old enough to remember what the Kansas Andrew Wiggins hype was. And I for sure remember when the Timberwolves played the Lakers for the first time and Andrew Wiggins and Kobe lined up, and it was like Kobe was like, I see a lot of myself in this kid. There was real Andrew Wiggins type. Like at that time, if you were to ask, I think a lot of the guys who were knowledgeable about the sport, 10 years, will Andrew Wiggins be one of the top 15 guys in the league? I think everybody would say, yeah, he should be. And I mean, we are fast forward 10 years later, and he's not. And it's not because the Timberwolves didn't invest in him. They did. He won Rookie of the Year. He was getting a lot of their uses from them. A lot of their roster decisions were built around him and Cat. He just didn't pan out. And like, that's fine. He's still a good NBA player. Not saying he's a bust. He's not. He won the championship, was an all-star. I think he was one of the biggest reasons the Warriors were able to win that championship in 2022. But the player he is, today is not the player that if you were to go back at 2015, that's not what people were saying about him.
Yeah.
I think we are at the point now with Jalen Green where we're 4 years in. We're about to go into year 5. And that leap that we were expecting him to take by now has not come. You look at a lot of his peers. Cade took that leap. Scotty Barnes taking the leap. Mobley took that leap. Şengün, to same draft class, he took that leap. We're still kind of waiting for Jalen to take that leap, and maybe it comes, right? Maybe year 5. Everybody was saying year 5 was a new year 3. Maybe this is the year it happens. But I think that it would be foolish of the Rockets to go into next season expecting it to happen when we are now 5 years in almost, and it has not happened. And I look at like the playoffs, and honestly, like a lot of the Warriors defense was designed to take him out. But I look at that and I say a lot of that is because, like Ali Khan pointed out, they know he's not going to make the read, right? Like you can send, I can afford to send 2 to you because I know you're not going to make that read to the wide open guy in the corner, the dump down low. I know you're not going to make that read. Another problem I have with that is game 1 and game 2, people don't remember, we were getting Jalen empty side a lot with Pods and Steph POA. And those aren't Tony Allens, right? Those aren't guys who should be going out there and stopping you from scoring. And when you're empty side, that's because they want you to pretty much attack that guy one-on-one. Struggle to do it. And the other thing I want to point out is that by, I want to say like game 5 or 6, and for sure game 7, a lot of that defensive attention that was going to Jalen, because the Warriors were like trapping and blitzing the hell out of Jalen. A lot of that defensive attention turned to Fred towards the end of the series. Game 7 tipped off, and I believe we won the tip. And the player that stepped up to guard Jalen was Steph. It wasn't Jimmy. It was Steph. So it's like, it's, I'll cut him some slack for how we perform, but we can't. I feel like just kind of saying that, oh, the Warriors just took him. I feel like it's kind of a blanket excuse for a lot of the problems that he had. A lot of the problems he had weren't because the Warriors blitzed and trapped him, right? A lot was just he just didn't perform, right? Like the game 4, he dribbled the ball off his foot twice in the first 30 seconds, right? Like I think he had 5 turnovers that game. That's kind of on him, And so me personally, if I'm the general manager, to kind of answer the overarching continuity thing, if I'm GM, I think that it's time. I think it's time, and I think that a lot of those resources that we're putting into Jalen, a lot of that usage, I think should now be invested into Amin, into Reed, into Shingo, into these other guys out there that we think can actually be out there. But that being said, I'm not GM, and if you tell me that if Stone's like, I think this is the year that it clicks for him, that's fine by me. That's what I said earlier. You just need to bring in something or have a contingency plan for in the event that it does not happen. And we're about to be 5 years in. It may not happen. And if it does not happen, I don't want to go into another playoff series where our best perimeter scorer is averaging 13 points per game in a series. I can't do that again next year. So if you want to roll with Jalen, that's fine. Bring in, I want you to bring in somebody like a Colin Sexton or like a Malik Monk. I think Cam Johnson isn't necessarily like a shooting guard, but he's someone who can go out there. He's played the 2 for the Nets at times. He can go out there and kind of hit threes. Bring in somebody like that. Or if you don't want to do that, make sure this is the year that you develop Reed. I'm not a huge Cam Whitmore fan, but if you think Cam Whitmore can be that guy, make sure this is the year you develop Cam Whitmore. But you just going into next season saying, all right, this is the only option we have there. And if he's good, he's good. If it's not, well, we're out of luck. I think that will be a failure of the front office. So that's just kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I'll say this really quickly and jump to a new topic. When it comes to Jalen, I say this all the time. They won every single game against the Warriors where he scored double digits. I know the 38-point game stands out, but the other games, double digits, the Rockets win. Like, if you say that at the beginning of the series, oh yeah, the Rockets win the series. No, like you can't go out there and put up 8, 7, 11, 13. It just can't happen. Ali Khan said it best. They were putting these guys on him like Pods and Buddy, and they were stunting. But again, Jalen did nothing to adjust to these, and he kind of accepted that he was the focus of the defense, and he did nothing to adjust. He was attacking the rim, wasn't getting any calls, and this goes to, in my personal opinion, he needs to go out there and gain like 10 pounds this offseason. I think he gets knocked off his spot way too often. I think that's going to benefit him a lot. And I will say this, Kelly mentioned it, catch and shoot, he was around 40% this year. That's a benefit of his as well. That improved. But yeah, he's got to improve mentally. I thought he was weak in that series. A lot of things have to improve. And if you run it back next year, that's the big question. What are we doing? Is the leash a lot shorter? They have mentioned they want to get guys like Reed in there a lot more. They want to get Cam in there more. How does that happen if you run back the exact same roster? It's hard to run a 10-man rotation. I do want to give props to the Pacers. They're in the finals running 10, 11 at times. I'd like to see the Rockets do that because they have really good depth. But, Jalen, again, like we're going into year 5 and we're running out of excuses. It was his first playoff series. I do see a lot of people say that, and it was. But at the end of the day, you're supposed to be the person who takes this team, very far. Because when he's clicking, this team is pretty much unstoppable. And they're in the Western Conference Finals for sure. I'm not going to say they're beating the Thunder. They probably don't. But they're in the Western Conference Finals, in my opinion, if Jalen is hooping the way he's supposed to. And that's
Can I just make one more point before we move on to the next topic? So there was a comment on our YouTube stream where someone mentioned, all right, we know this is a problem. What are the solutions? To me, to get Jalen going, you got to make it easy for him. What are some good, efficient ways to get him involved? So like minimize the amount of decisions he has to make. I think Will mentioned they would do the empty side actions for him in that series with Alper and Şengün. Yeah, keep running those empty corner actions. What does that do? That basically takes away a side of the court. There's no help defender. So you don't have to worry about a tag or a stunt or anything on that side. you can just focus on your two-man game. If defenses come over, make the simple pass, swing the ball, get it to the opposite side. I think we need to do more for him in terms of the half court to really minimize, the complex reads, build enough rhythm for him with those easy half court reads, and then get him going. And let's see if he can make those, three level reads and 3-level scoring and the passes there. So like get him going on Iverson cuts. We know he can really dash pass and use a screen well and use Steven Adams screen if he comes back in Alperen Şengün, run more empty side pick and rolls, like I said, and just run some more curls, run some more actions where he's going towards the rim. When he's driving and he touches the paint, that's when successful things happen. And for him, oftentimes that requires him using a screen, because right now he's not the best in isolation. So use him coming off of screens more, have him cut off the ball more, get him going there. You have a man, you want the ball in his hands a lot more anyways. I just feel like there are solutions you can implement in regards to your current personnel, and it's just up to Ime Udoka and his coaching staff and his offensive coaches to be able to put that into fruition.
100% agree. Does anyone else want to chime in on Jalen before we jump to the next topic?
I'll say, to kind of respond to what Ali Khan was saying, because I don't disagree at all. I think a lot of that, though, right? Because if we're saying Jalen's going to be here next year, which, maybe it's looking like he's going to be, I think Brad is right. He has to put on muscle, right? Got to put on some muscle, because a lot of the problem with why he's not able to get to the spots he wants to get to and can't finish through contact is because he's just not strong. Like one of the reasons why he struggled to get past like Steph empty side, number one is the handle has to continue to get better, but Steph is just stronger than him, right? And respect to Steph, like I said, Steph isn't like this. Like there are guys in the league who are stronger than Steph Curry, right? So like you have to be stronger, right? One of the reasons why he's not able to finish through contact at the rim is once a guy bumps him, that's it, so he has to get a bit stronger. The handle has to be a lot tighter, right? He has to be able to get to his spots and actually be able to weaponize how athletic he is, right? That's another problem I think he has, is he's not able to weaponize the fact that he's probably the best athlete on the court at pretty much all times. I think a lot of it is the handle. And then, like Ali kind of said, it's just taking the checkdowns, taking the simple passes, right? I think he has improved tremendously as a pick and roll operator when hitting the roll man. But like, can you when they send two there, can you see the weak side skip, right? There was a play that I remember kind of went crazy on Rockets Twitter during the playoffs where Jalen kind of got walled up. Everybody's like, look at the spacing. And somebody I want to say it was Roosh. He was like, the reason that's happening is because Dylan's wide open and he didn't make the pass. And it's like, yeah, like you take Dylan's wide open, you got to make that pass. And that's how you punish the defense for sending two to you. So, those are things I think that Jalen himself can continue to work on and improve upon that or independent of, what the coaching staff can do, from which I agree with Ali Khan. The coaching staff can still can do a little bit more.
Yeah, I'll say this. We have around like 10 minutes left, so we could talk about anything. Draft is coming up in the next few weeks. We will probably save the draft guys.
You mentioned Tari and Jabari's extensions.
Yeah, we could talk about those.
Oh, yeah, you did, yeah.
Kelly, Kelly, you're our guy. You're our guy for that. So we'll start off with you. Let's see what you have to say.
So those two are in kind of different situations than what we saw with Jalen and Alpi, right? Like, you understand, going back to last summer, the front office, although they know that they were still trying to figure out what their hierarchy was, they understood that Alpi and Jalen were part of that structure, right? So it made sense to get them locked down to deals that will probably amount to being fairly decent in terms of when the cap jumps in the next summer. With Tari and Jabari, it's a bit different, right? Like this is the NBA, for all intents and purposes, is a points league, right? Like, yes, those guys are integral parts of winning and building a culture, but in terms of the aggression or the desperation to lock them down, I don't think that's the same case as you saw with Alpi and Jalen. And that went all the way till almost the season started. So I do think that, those guys want to be in Houston and they want to have them in Houston for a long time. It's just because the summer is so tricky in terms of things that might be available on the market, you kind of have to push everything off until you have that order of operations. And I do think that that's kind of what we're seeing in Houston right now. Everyone's like in a holding pattern, right? So I think that ultimately affects Tari and Jabari. For example, like Jabari is a name that I've heard around the league of like for a team like Phoenix, like they like Jabari, right? And going back to the whole Kevin Durant thing, but the Rockets understand that, these guys, although Jabari kind of lost the starting spot after getting hurt and then Amen had the whole breakout, they need to figure out because I think going back to that playoff series, if you kind of saw how they used Jabari, he was in a minimized role, right? And on paper in a vacuum, Jabari has always been like, I guess the quintessential role player, right? He's a 6'10", 6'11 guy, can stretch the floor. He has a little mid-range pull-up. He can defend different positions. But I think what we saw in the playoffs was, he's kind of been victim to the Steven Silas thing in terms of not having plays called for him, right? Steven said that. Ime has alluded to that as well. I think when you're in that kind of position as a role player, it's kind of tough, especially when you're coming off the bench trying to figure out insert yourself into the game, find a rhythm. It's different for Tari because Tari lives and breathes defense. He's gonna, if he gets 8 deflections and 2 steals, he's good, right? But a guy like Jabari needs 4 to 5 threes a game. He needs, those extra touches. So yes, they want to keep them around, but figuring out how to better incorporate them is also, a big part of the summer.
I want to say this really quickly about that. Jabari, a guy who, shout out to Brett Usher, one of the best, pages on NBA Twitter right now. He posted a video of Jabari, hitting those turnaround fades over 50% this year when Jabari was taking those turnaround fades. Low sample, of course, but that's another, part of his game where he excels at. Yes, he looked really good against Golden State, most efficient player, best three-point shooter, minimized role, as Kelly said. So how do you get a guy like that, more involved, especially if you bring a guy like Steven Adams back and they're running that double big lineup that much more? Jabari, if you're going to give him an extension eventually, it's not the most ideal to have him playing less than 20 minutes a night. So how can they maximize him? Those are a lot of questions that I'd like to see answered. But yeah, that's what I want to chime in and say ultimately. Alikhan, what do you think?
I want Jabari back in the starting lineup.
I agree.
Yeah. And I think Big B in the comments just said the same thing. So good minds think alike. For me, his spacing is super important. And also, in my opinion, he is one of your best entry passers on the team. If you look at, since Jabari came into the league, Alperen was already here, but since Jabari came into the league, the amount of most of Jabari's assists go to Alperen Şengün. And that's by design. Because you have Jabari at the slot or at the top of the key, he is able to make those entry passes into Alperen Şengün. And Kelly's in the locker room. He'll tell you those two have a budding chemistry where at first they were trying to figure each other out. They are getting along really well. And Jabari is a big focal point and leader in that locker room. And him and Alpi are very tight. And to a point where, for me, I feel that should translate itself onto the court. Jabari is going to shoot. He's not doing the thing like he used to at the start of his career where he would get the ball and just tuck it up because he wasn't getting touches. If he gets the ball, he's taking the shot because the coaches are entrusting him and empowering him to take the shot, or he's putting the ball on the floor or making that quick decision or quick read. He is a definition of a quick decision player. He's not holding the ball too long. And you need to have that when you're surrounding you're out like guys like Alperen Şengün and Jalen Green, guys who can just make those quick decisions, take the shot or get the ball out of their hands if it's not there. And I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the pod. Jabari is, for lack of a better purpose, he is that focal point of their defense in the half court. When they were running zone and when they were doing different things, when Adams was not on the floor, Jabari was the guy calling out the coverages. Jabari was the guy saying low man needs to come over. Jabari was the guy helping make sure the gap integrity was there. Jabari is very important defensively. And interesting with all in that he needs to be starting. And one last point about Jabari and Tari kind of combined together. You have to consider we've been talking about trades and if the Rockets will stay or kind of make changes. If you sign Jabari this offseason to an extension, you cannot use him in a trade going into the season if something appears. I think what will likely happen is they will probably sign one of the two to an extension and then go into restricted free agency with the other next offseason. This is not me reporting anything. This is just what would make most sense to me, because you allow the market to dictate what the value is. Because as of right now, I don't think the Rockets personally can really dictate what the value is, because you haven't really, if you think about it, Kelly, you mentioned even Tari, he creates his own offense and defense because of his chaos. You can't, I don't think you can label either one of them as having an identity as a role player. They're both still coming into their own. And so with that in mind, what do you label them in terms of their value as a contract? I don't know.
I'll say this really quickly, then I want to kick it to Will. On the Jabari front, I 100% agree. If you bring him back, I'd like to see him starting. When he went down in January with that hand injury, the Rockets were a top 5 defense, top 5 rebounding team. In the time period he was out, they ended up being like 27th defensively. They dropped to 19th in defensive efficiency, and the rebounding fell off a cliff completely. Those are two things Jabari brings to the table. So again, if I bring him back with an extension, I don't want to see him in that minimized role off the bench. I'd like to see him starting. Net rating wise too, when he's in that starting lineup. Oh, not even that. The lineup the Rockets were running in the playoffs had a negative net rating in the regular season. That's not ideal. Of course, Amid needs to start, but and I love Dillon Brooks. Dillon Brooks had a great year, close to 40% from three. I'd still start Jabari personally in that spot. He's very big for their rebounding. It also helps him play more point of attack defense instead of trying to bang down low. Even he can get a lot of rebounds, of course, but that's not his ideal position. But yeah, that's the last thing I want to say on Bar. We have around 3 minutes left. Of course, we can go over. Will, I'll let you close us on this topic.
Yeah, I think Ali Khan kind of stole what I was going to say, which was that if one of the reasons why I don't know if Tari or Jabari will see extensions as soon as, like, I think when free agency opens, I think it's when you can start extending guys, maybe a little bit before that, I'm not really sure. But I think one of the reasons we may not see them get those extensions initially is because if like a Giannis Antetokounmpo becomes available, I think Jabari is going in the Rockets say we want to go out there and get him. I think Jabari is probably going to be in that trade, especially they play the same position. You may not see much overlap between him and Giannis on the court together. So like I think Jabari is probably going to go in that deal. And no, I don't think Giannis is going to become available. But my point is just that if something does become available and you're like, I need to go out there and make a move for this kind of guy. If you have, like Ali Khan said, if you extend Tari or Jabari right now, you can't trade them anymore. And I think the Rockets are at the point now where they want to remain fluid and they want to keep all their options open. So I think that they probably won't look to extend them initially, although I could be wrong. But come into the summer, or like is like the heat of like free agency and trade season kind of comes to a close, when it kind of becomes a bit more apparent, hey, Giannis isn't asking out, or like the Rockets aren't going to be in the runnings for insert disgruntled star. Go back to Vicini's podcast. I think he said something of like 98 million, somewhere in that ballpark. 4 years, 98 million for Jabari. I love that. I think it's a great deal for Jabari if he'd be willing to sign a contract like that. I would even try to front load it maybe. I love that for him. I think because of one, Jabari's draft status, but then also because Tari Eason, drafted a little bit later, had the injury concerns and whatnot. I do think that Tari is probably going to get a little bit less than whatever Jabari gets. And so, like, if we're assuming Jabari is in like the 24 to 26-ish range, I could see Tari being in like the 22, 24, 25-ish range, somewhere in that ballpark. And same thing there. I think those are two guys who are like starting caliber wings on contenders. And so I think that you would obviously want to ink those type of guys to those type of deals, keep them here in Houston long term. And then in terms of just Jabari starting, I think that one, maybe I'm alone. I think Tari's better than Bari. So I think the Rockets. I mean, Brad, this is probably where you can help me out. Well,
They won 12 straight. They won 12.
Yeah, I would say when Tari was starting, we were going on a pretty crazy win streak. And I mean, I've thought Tari was better than Bari before that win streak. So I think if I had to pick between the two in terms of like starting, I think I would probably err more towards Tari. That being said, I think, if you can find a way to get them both in that five at some point in time, that would be amazing. I think the ideal world for the Rockets is that Tari and Bari are, when it's time for Dillon to kind of be phased out, maybe he goes to a bench role, right? The ideal world, I think, would be that Tari and Bari are your 3 and your 4. And that gives you a good mix of like length and shot making, spacing, and whatnot. So yeah, but yeah, like in my opinion, though, I think that they're probably going to keep their options open. But if we can get them in like that, like I said, that 4 years, 98 kind of range for Jabari, and maybe Tari is not too far behind him, I think that's a really good deal for the Rockets, assuming we don't go out there and make a move for like a Giannis or anybody else who could maybe come available, between now and I guess the end of free agency.
Yeah, for sure. Does anyone else have anything else y'all wanted to add to that topic in particular?
I don't know if anybody in the chat anything they want to like go over really quickly, because if not, I think that was it for me.
That was cool. That was cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was fun. It was fun. Really good group. This is gonna be a really good
That was
podcast.
good, man.
Yeah, I'm gonna say this. We're gonna be back, of course, next week, next Tuesday, same exact time. We're gonna have the topics for you guys sent out. We're gonna stream it on all of our platforms, so you'll see it. But again, man, look, I'm very excited to get this going. We'll be back. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. We're just getting started. Last I saw, we had 200. Hopefully we have maybe 400 by the next show. But again, Kelly Eco, Ali Kamajani, Will, aka Vice Houston, myself. We'll be back next week. Appreciate you guys for tuning in.